Now, the reason you're here in my presentation, perhaps, is because you are interested in great project managers. This subject has interested me my whole career. In fact, I continue to try to be a great project manager myself. Maybe you are interested in being a great project manager. In fact, I think maybe some of you already are great project managers. Yes? At least some of the time? Congratulations to you. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a description of what I think the definition is of a great project manager. Then I'm going to help you understand the relationship between project success and project manager success. And then I'm going to give you a summary of results from surveys and research related to being a great project manager. This presentation today is for project managers. And toward the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you a list of things you can do to become a great project manager. Now, if the subject interests you beyond today, then the CD you have has a copy of a paper about this subject. If reading a 10-page paper is more than you want to invest of your time, then you can come up front afterwards and get a copy of a one-page summary. And I encourage you to come up afterwards. Okay, so I have a deal that I would like to make with you right now. I promise to be informative, sometimes interesting, and maybe a little bit funny. But you have to promise something for me. Will you pay attention? And please ask me questions at any time. Do we have a deal? Any time. Please. Okay. So let's put the presentation back on the screen. Thank you. The studies and research that I'm going to talk about have been conducted for about the last 10 years. And so rather than you having to read them, I've read them all. And I've picked out only the ones that I think are related to the subject that interests us today, becoming a great project manager. So pay attention. Think for a moment about what you think a great project manager is. Think about the characteristics that someone you know has that you think makes them a great project manager. Okay? Now I want you to listen to a little story that I'm going to play for you. And this story gives my definition of a great project manager. This is Ernest Shackleton, one of the greatest explorers 100 years ago. He had a journey to Antarctica. He wanted to be the first person ever to cross the continent. His ship got stuck in ice. He never made his destination. The temperature was so cold that the men could hear the water freeze. The ship became stuck in the ice and then crushed. There was no hope of rescue. The men spent 18 months trying to save themselves. Toward the end, they rowed a boat 800 miles across the frigid Arctic Ocean. And in the end, every man survived. Why did I tell you this story as a great project manager story? What was the project? The project was to get to Antarctica and to cross the continent. Did they ever make it? No. It was a complete failure. Why is this a story about a great project manager? Because every day for those 18 months, Those men kept a journal, a diary, and they wrote down how they felt every day for 18 months. And do you know what they wrote in that diary? This was the best time of my life. Wait a minute. 18 months, no hope of rescue, cold, frigid Antarctic conditions. Why was it the best time of their life? All due to the leadership of Ernest Shackleton. The measure of success of a great project manager is the measure of the followers that you have on your project team. No matter how difficult your projects, do you think your followers are going to write that about you? The best time of their lives? I sure hope so. In this story, we see that the men who have decided this was the best time of their lives describe their project leader, Ernest Shackleton, as someone who was concerned about their welfare. He developed relationships with every one of his 24 men. And these relationships were so powerful that they wrote it was the best time of their lives. Now, certainly in project management, we have learned that it's important to manage tasks. But what this story tells us, it's even more important to manage relationships. That's my definition of a great project manager. Now let's look at how we might become one ourselves. I've been reading for 30 years about project success. For 30 years, and it's stayed the same every year I read about it. People look at me as a project manager, and if I have a successful project, they think I'm successful. If I have a failed project, they think I have failed. Project success in our world equals project manager success. So think about the projects you are working on. If you succeed, then people are usually going to think of you as successful. So your goal, of course, to be a great project manager is to have successful projects. What do you think about that? Do you agree? Yes? If you have a failed project, will someone think you have succeeded? No. So all you have to do to be a great project manager is have a successful project. End of presentation. Thank you very much. It's harder than that. Times have changed, and the definition of success has expanded, and we're going to take a look at that. Times have changed, and the complexity as projects expanded. We're going to take a look at that. More projects are dependent upon people besides you. They're dependent upon people higher up in the organization, the executive. We'll take a look at that. And we'll take a look at how we as project managers feel we're getting helped by our executives. All right? So all we have to do is succeed, but it's harder than it used to be to have project success. This is my history lesson for you today about project success. In the beginning, and I show that as the 1960s, project success was very simple. It worked. Now in the United States, we have a space program. And in the beginning, our objective was to get the rocket to launch. That's all we cared about. If the rocket launched in the beginning, in the 1960s, the entire country was happy. In the 1970s, the definition of success got bigger. Not only did the rocket have to launch, but we had to do it on a schedule within some budget. By the way, what do we call this? The triple constraint? And who do we blame for the triple constraint, by the way? PMI. PMI, thank you. They've made our lives much harder now. We have to do three things. And President Kennedy in the United States declared in the 1970s that the purpose of the space program was to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of the decade. Triple constraint, a tough challenge. Time moved on again. Success definition expanded again. I show that as the 1980s. Now we actually have to make somebody happy, and we call that person the customer. Thank you very much. No longer is technical success enough, or time and schedule. Triple constraint, not enough. We actually have to make the customer happy. And then later, and I show that on this chart, as the 1990s and beyond, it expanded again. We have to have some social or cultural or organizational impact because of our projects. There came another United States president, and he described the goal of the space program, President George Bush, to extend the human presence across our solar system, because doing so improves our lives and lifts our national spirit. How many project managers in this room want to be responsible for lifting national spirit all by yourself? Do you think you can do that all by yourself? No. That's a very difficult definition of project success, and that's my point. The success definition has expanded. Okay? Complexity. We have people who work in the IT field here today. Please raise your hand. IT, information technology. There must be a few more. A few more? Okay, thank you. Put your hands down. You have created this problem for the rest of us. In the early days, you had a standalone personal computer with standalone applications. It was very simple to develop a project and succeed now. What do we have today? Networks. In fact, you've made it worse. We have enterprise networks. Global, interconnected enterprise networks. And it's going in the wrong direction, because now you IT people want us to use a cloud. This is much more complex than it ever used to be. A simple little project is no more. In the IT world's complexity rules the day. And for many of the rest of us, the same is true. There are more stakeholders, more dependencies, more complexity for all of us. So remember, to be a great project manager, all you need to do is have a successful project. What's the problem? It's getting harder. What do you think is funny about that? We have an expression that we like to use. Maybe you have the same expression. The beatings will continue until the morale improves. So the project manager will do more and more and more work. And that seems to be the trend. The average number of projects in the world today for each single project manager is 6 projects for 1 project manager. And that trend has been going up for the last decade. The project managers are being asked to do more and more work. Well, the problem is we cannot control everything we need in order for us to succeed with all of this work. I cannot lift national spirit on my own, no matter how much I want to do it. I am dependent on other people, and those people are being called the executive. Some of us were in the room Thankfully, I was one of them when Lambert presented a few minutes ago, and he talked about organizational project management authority. He talked about things beyond the bounds of control of the project manager. I cannot succeed without getting those things lined up to do what I need done. I cannot succeed without going to my executive to get help. Now, when I was here last year, somebody taught me a word. OGA? OGA? Did I learn the right word? Okay. I need help in order to succeed. I need to go to someone above me in the organization to help me succeed. This can be a challenge in some cultures, can't it? That's why we're talking today about how to be a great project manager. We'll talk about how to work on that. In the United States, the U.S. government has conducted a survey of project managers. And they asked a question. Are you getting all the help you need from your executives to succeed? No. 60 to 90% of the project managers surveyed in the United States federal government do not get enough help. And there are other surveys as well that give us the exact same conclusion. Surveys of CIOs, CFOs. A global workforce study conducted of nearly 90,000 people worldwide by the Towers Perrin Corporate. Same thing. We as project managers do not feel we're getting enough support, yet we know we need it. So that's the problem. Does this seem realistic to you? Is this the problem that you sometimes are running into? Not enough support? Okay, then stay tuned. What's so funny? All right. Let's have a little conversation. I want to be a great project manager, and I know that I can't succeed by myself. I need to ask my executive for help. Dear executive, please act on some of the items from this list. Signed, dedicated project manager. Here's my list. I want this done. What do you think would happen to me if I walked into the office of the OGA with that list? Not a good thing. But it's a good list. How many in the room agree that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that projects should follow a documented plan? Isn't that a good idea? Yes? Wouldn't we like that? We would like to go in and tell the executive that we should have plans for all our projects? Or the next one. Wouldn't we like to tell the executive that we think our projects ought to be based on requirements which are written down? But the problem is, if we go in with a list like this, we're not likely to make much progress. Maybe you have your own lists. Each of you who works as a project manager has already thought about the help you need in order to succeed. You probably have your own lists. Those lists are much better than mine. You could start with my list, but then you could tailor it to make it your own. And those are the actions you need for someone to take for you to be a great project manager. But there are barriers getting in the way of having this happen. Even if you have the best list in the world, even if you are the greatest project manager in the world, there are barriers to having someone act on this for you. Now we're going to look at what you can do to make all this happen. As project managers, there are things available for you to do. You do not have to wait for someone else to solve this dilemma for you. All right? So we're going to take a look at the leadership style called servant leadership and how you can use that. We're going to take a look at a study of alpha project managers, alpha, the best of the best. We're going to take a look at a study about failed projects. We'll take another look at a study about new product development. And we'll take a look at some standards that exist. And we'll only look at these things from the standpoint of great project managers and what we can take from that. Servant leadership, serve the needs of others first. You remember that story of Ernest Shackleton I told? 18 months of terrible cold and misery. Best time of my lives is what his project team wrote. Ernest Shackleton practiced servant leadership. 1/3 of the Fortune 100 companies in the United States practice servant leadership. General Colin Powell, who I was lucky enough to hear give the keynote speech at the PMI Global Congress 3 years ago, spent an hour and a half describing his leadership style. He talked about servant leadership. Servant leadership is an extremely powerful technique for people like us who are trying to motivate our project teams, motivate them to such a degree they write down it's the best time of their lives just because of my being a great project manager. So in servant leadership, what we do is we give direction first because we're the leader. So if I was Ernest Shackleton and I was giving direction to one of my men, I would go, look, George, your job today is to clean up after the dogs. Oh, by the way, is there anything you need from me so you can do your job? Ernest Shackleton would have that conversation every day with every man. And he would always end the conversation, what can I do to help? Servant leadership. That created an almost unbreakable bond between leader and follower, between project manager and project team member. What can I do to help? Let's face it, even as great project managers, we have limited authority. So how are we going to get people to do what we want done? How are we going to get them to do the tasks that are important to us? And that answer comes from the relationships we form with our project team. And servant leadership is an effective technique to form relationships with project teams. What can I do to help? What would happen to you if you walked up to a member of your project team and asked them that question? What would happen? Somebody tell me. Louder, please. They would feel honored? Okay. So it might, okay. So in your environment, it might be an effective technique. They would feel honored. In your environment, is it a sign of weakness as a project manager to ask that question? No, it's not. It's not. In fact, you're building respect, which is a source of strength. This book that I've shown here is listed at the end of the paper that's on your CD. So if you care to read more about servant leadership, this is an excellent book. It was written by Greenleaf. It was written just over 25 years ago. And as I've told you, it's now a very popular technique. Andy Crow, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, and I hope you have the pleasure of meeting too, he did a study. All right? I want to explain the study to you. Raise your hands if you think planning is important in project management. Do you think planning is important in project management? Of course, every hand went up in the room. Thank you. Put them down. Of course it is. Andy Crow surveyed 5,000 project managers, their bosses, and their stakeholders. And he asked them the same question. Do you think planning is important? And he got the same answer. Everybody said yes, all 5,000. So far, this is not too interesting, Mike. We already knew this. Here's the interesting part. He asked them the second question. How much do you do? How much planning do you do? And he took the answer and he separated. The answer that came from the alpha project managers, the best of the best, the top 2% of the project managers, that's here. And the answer from everyone else over here. And the alphas, the best of the best, twice as much time planning. Twice as much time. And then he asked them the same question about communication. Do you think communication is important? Yes, everybody said yes. How much do you do? And the alphas, the best of the best, the great project managers, do twice as much. They spend twice as much time communicating, and it's more effective. So let me demonstrate for you the kind of behavior that I am not talking about. Text message to everyone on my project. Nice job, thank you. That is not what the alpha project managers do. That is not what great project managers do. They communicate individually with every stakeholder on their project, individually, and they do it in a style that suits them. Some of their stakeholders get a text message, some get a conversation, some have a meeting. They spend twice as much time communicating, and they do it twice as effectively. And oh, by the way, the alphas act as if they have authority. They act as if they have authority. They do not wait to be told yes, yes, yes by their boss for everything they need to do. This is alpha project management. I think this is great project management. I think if we behave like alphas more often, we're likely to be great project managers. Now the failure study. Jim Johnson, who I'm pleased to say is a friend of mine, he runs the Standish Group, Chaos Studies. Those of you in the IT world, he talks about you because you fail so often. All right? But the good news is he's analyzed decades worth of studies, and he's found out why some of them succeed. And the most important thing he's found out for us as great project managers is the shorter the project, the more likely it is to succeed. The shorter the project, the more likely it is to succeed. Hey, I know how to shorten my projects. I can split it up into 2 projects. Phase A, Phase B. It's such a remarkable difference. If you look at the curves that he's given us, 6 months for him turns out to be an ideal length of time for a project. If you get much longer than 6 months, your odds of success are horrible. So this failure study tells us to shorten our projects as much as we can. This comes from Canada. It's Dr. Cooper. He studies new products. What makes new products successful? And he found some similar results. There's a need for speed. The faster you can get the new product launched, the more successful it's likely to be. Reduce the cycle time. Shorten the life cycle. Okay? The last piece of research we'll look at are the standards that have been developed. And certainly PMI has standards. There's a framework that PMI has developed that describes the behaviors and characteristics of great project managers. IPMA, the International Project Management Association. The Commonwealth of Australia has standards. And in the United States, we have a brand new certification for federal employees, federal government employees. And all of these standards focus not on cost, time, or schedule management. No, they focus on the soft skills. And they all include leadership. Leadership turns out to be a component of these competency standards. So the great project managers we know demonstrate leadership. And thankfully, we heard a little bit about that earlier today in one of our presentations. Okay, here's the list. So I'm going to review with you just one or two of the items on the list, and then you'll be so excited that you'll come up and get copies for yourself. On the left-hand side is what great project managers do, and on the right-hand side is how they do it. So this is the summary of all that research that we just talked about. This is the summary. So for example, great project managers meet the needs of others first. They focus on the customer. They pay attention to what the stakeholders want and need. Great project managers put that in front of everything else. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Great project managers are heroes with a plan. How do they do that? They make sure that they spend more time planning. How much time planning? Twice as much. Now, by the way, where's all that extra time coming from? Aren't you already busy? Of course you are. But as a great project manager, you now know that planning is so important that you're going to stop doing something that's less important. And the same with communicating. You now know that communicating is so important to be a great project manager, you're going to spend less time doing something else. The last one. The great project managers go well beyond all the technical details of managing cost, schedule, and scope. Well beyond that. All those competency standards that I reviewed have soft skill characteristics that we know great project managers absolutely need in order to succeed. Okay. So I've given you information. I've even given you a list of actions you can take to become a great project manager. But knowing what to do is not the same as doing it. I think we all know that in this room. Okay. Neil Witten, who's one of the more popular authors and speakers in the project management world, puts it this way. He says that many project managers are not willing to make the tough decisions. We know what to do. I've just told you what to do. We have a list of things we can do to be a great project manager. Are you willing to make the tough decisions? Jim Collins, one of the most highly paid business writers in the United States, writes that to succeed at project management, it takes an absolutely iron will. Now, this is probably the only time in my life I'm going to be able to be quoted next to Jim Collins. I know it. I don't make as much money as he does either. In my opinion, project management is about applying common sense with uncommon discipline. How many times are we confronted with a decision to make in project management? We know what to do. We all raised our hand and acknowledged that planning was important. We all know that. Do we have the discipline to do twice as much? So That question is unanswered. You will answer that for yourselves. All right, let's do a summary. So we learned that there's a very simple definition to become a great project manager. All you have to do is have a successful project. But we learned that success is more difficult now than ever. The definition expanded, the complexity went up, thank you IT people. And we are more dependent upon others. We're more dependent upon the executive. Good news is that there's plenty of research and studies out there. And we looked at a few of the ones that are very relevant to our lives. The Alpha study, the Failure study, new product development. And we looked at the competency standards. And from those, we have a list of actions that we can take to be great project managers. And it's my sincere goal that everyone here in the room becomes a great project manager. Thank you for your time and attention.